How could anyone do this to their elderly father? The business review sites told an even starker story. Their coffee shops had dropped from 4-star ratings to 1.5 stars virtually overnight. Knowing what these people did to their father makes the coffee taste bitter. One Yelp review read, "Local news interviewed former customers outside their flagship location. I can't give money to people who would forge documents to steal from their own dad," a middle-aged woman explained. Derek appeared on a local business program attempting damage control that only made things worse. When the interviewer asked about the forged medical evaluation, he stammered about misunderstandings and family dynamics. "But Mr. Finch," the reporter pressed, "police found the payment to a known document forger in your business account. How do you explain that?" His deer-in-headlights expression said everything. Within hours, clips of his fumbling responses were viral on social media. Charlotte attempted her own interview with a sympathetic local host, but the questions were sharper than she expected. "We were trying to ensure his safety and well-being," she insisted, her composed facade cracking slightly. "Then why forge legal documents? Why not involve your father in the decision?" The interviewer countered. "Mr. Harrison founded a medical technology company and runs a multi-million-dollar foundation. Hospital administrators across the region describe him as sharp and engaged. Are you suggesting they're all mistaken?" The interview ended with Charlotte walking off camera. By June, their business was failing. The community had spoken with their wallets, and the verdict was unanimous. My phone rang one evening. It was Ryan, now 18 and preparing for college. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about changing my major to nonprofit management," he said. "I want to learn how to run a foundation properly." Through my window, the Pacific Ocean reflected the sunset in shades of gold and crimson. Clara would have been proud of the boy Ryan was becoming despite his parents' choices. "That's excellent, son," I replied. "The foundation will need leadership from someone who understands that true wealth lies in helping others." A year of transformation was almost complete. On the 20th of April, 2025, exactly 1 year later, I stood in my own kitchen again, the morning light streaming through windows that faced the garden Clara and I had planted together. The cherry pie baking in the oven filled the house with the same sweet scent as that terrible morning 12 months ago. But everything else had changed. My suitcase sat in the closet where it belonged. Clara's jewelry box was back on our dresser, each piece carefully returned after serving as evidence. The family photo albums lined the living room shelves again, documenting happier times when I still believed in my daughter's love. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. It wasn't Charlotte this time. She was serving an 18-month sentence for elder abuse and fraud. Instead, Ryan stood on my porch, now 19, and studying nonprofit management at Portland State University. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," he said. His embrace was warm, genuine, everything his parents had never been. We sat at my kitchen table, the one Clara and I had chosen 40 years ago, while I explained the foundation documents he would inherit. "Your great-grandmother, Clara, believed wealth was a tool for dignity," I told him as he signed the succession papers. "She used to say that money without purpose was just paper with numbers on it." "I understand, Grandpa. I promise to honor what you and great-grandma built." Together we drove to Silverwood Manor for what had become my weekly board meeting. The transformation was remarkable. Chess tables occupied the recreation room where 1-5 residents played with focused intensity. The new library hosted Edna reading stories to visiting children. Art therapy sessions filled the East Wing with laughter and creativity. "Mr. Harrison," Lyle called from his chess match, "come see the philosophy discussion group schedule. We're debating Aristotle next week." The bulletin board near the entrance displayed thank you letters from residents and families. "You return dignity to forgotten people," Edna's note, written in her careful cursive, read. "Mom is happy for the first time in 3 years," a daughter wrote whose mother now thrived there. "Mr. Thompson's quarterly report showed measurable success. A waiting list for admission, recognition from the state as a model facility, and staff retention up 60%. "Excellence follows naturally when you treat people as human beings rather than inventory," I replied. Back in my kitchen, as sunset approached, I placed a single candle on the cherry pie. Not from loneliness this time, but celebration. The walls displayed artwork from Silverwood Manor residents, watercolor seascapes, Charcoal portraits, abstract pieces that spoke of minds still creating, still contributing. A photograph of the transformed facility sat next to Clara's picture. In it, residents played chess, read books, painted canvases, engaged with visiting families. Their faces showed contentment, purpose, the dignity Clara and I had always believed every person deserved. I lit the candle and spoke to the quiet kitchen. "Happy birthday, William. You chose justice over revenge, transformation over destruction." The phone rang. It was Ryan, calling from his dorm room. "Grandpa, I wanted to tell you about my foundation management class. We studied your Silverwood Manor transformation as an example of strategic philanthropy creating systemic change." Through the window, the Pacific Ocean reflected the day's last light. Somewhere in the distance, seagulls called to each other above the waves. Patient hunters, Clara used to say, who knew exactly when to strike. I picked up the phone, surrounded by evidence of a year that had transformed betrayal into purpose, loneliness into legacy, and victimhood into victory. "Tell me all about it, son. We have important work ahead of us." If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. "Happy birthday, Dad," my daughter said, carrying my suitcase to the door of the retirement home. Her husband smiled as if it were a gift, not a betrayal. But when I walked into the director's office, he stood up, shocked, his face pale with shock. I had anticipated the betrayal, but I didn't expect that their birthday gift would be the beginning of their own end. The suitcase sat by my front door like a coffin. I stared at it from the kitchen doorway, my coffee mug trembling in my hand. Brown leather brass clasps, the one Clara and I bought for our honeymoon 45 years ago. But I hadn't packed it. I hadn't even touched it since we stored it in the closet after her funeral. My bare feet felt cold against the hardwood as I approached it. The zipper was pulled tight, corners bulging with hastily stuffed clothes. A slip of paper jutted from the side pocket, my handwriting but shakier than usual. "William Harrison, Silverwood Manor." "Charlotte," I called toward the stairs, though I knew she wasn't here. The house echoed back my own voice, hollow and confused. Clara's photograph watched me from the mantel, her silver frame catching morning light. In it, she wore that blue dress from my 65th birthday, the last one we celebrated together. She'd insisted on baking my favorite cherry pie, even though her hands were already too weak from the treatments. "You spoil me," I told her that day. "That's what wives do," she'd laughed, flour dusting her cheek. The memory hit like a punch to the chest. Clara would never have allowed this, whatever this was. My phone rang, cutting through the silence. Charlotte's name flashed on the screen. "Happy birthday, Dad." Her voice sparkled with artificial cheer. "We have a very special surprise planned for you today. Be ready at 2 o'clock sharp. Charlotte, there's a suitcase by my door." "Did you just be ready, Dad?" The warmth drained from her voice like water from a broken cup. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, harder than what needed to be." My throat tightened. "I was planning to bake your favorite cherry pie. Maybe you and Derek could stay for dinner, like we used to when. We'll see about that. Just be ready." The line went dead. I held the phone against my ear long after the dial tone stopped, as if holding on might bring her back. Might bring back the daughter who used to steal raw pie dough from my mixing bowl. My hand shook as I pulled ingredients from the pantry. Flour, sugar, the jar of cherries Clara had canned our last summer together. I needed normal. I needed the ritual of measuring and mixing. The comfort of tradition, but the flour scattered across the counter when I dropped the bag, sugar crunched underfoot. The cherries, Clara's cherries, rolled red across the kitchen floor like tiny drops of blood. I caught my reflection in the window above the sink. 70 years old, silver hair uncombed, pajamas wrinkled from a restless night. When had I become this fragile stranger? When had my own daughter started speaking to me like I was already gone? The pie crust came together despite my trembling fingers. I rolled it thin, placed it carefully in Clara's favorite pan, the ceramic one with tiny roses around the rim, the one Charlotte always admired as a child. By 1:30, the pie sat cooling on the rack, filling the house with the scent of home. I set the dining table with our wedding china, 3 place settings arranged perfectly. White plates with golden edges, the ones we'd saved for special occasions, cloth napkins Clara had embroidered herself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this surprise was something wonderful. A party, a celebration, a chance to feel like family again. Maybe the suitcase was for a weekend trip somewhere special. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard tires on gravel. Through the lace curtains, I watched Charlotte's silver SUV pull into my driveway. She sat in the passenger seat, checking her phone. Derek was driving, his profile sharp and focused. Neither of them looked toward the house where I stood waiting. The cherry pie cooled behind me, untouched. The suitcase waited by the door, packed with clothes I hadn't chosen, and something deep in my chest began to crack, like ice breaking on a spring river. I opened the door before they could knock, dish towels still clutched in my hands from the pie preparation. "Dad?" Charlotte's hug felt rehearsed, her arms barely touching my shoulders before pulling away. She smelled of expensive perfume and impatience. Derek's handshake was too firm, too brief. His eyes scanned past me toward the suitcase, calculating. "Ready to go, Bill?" he asked. "Actually, the cherry pie just finished cooling. Your mother's recipe, Charlotte. Why don't you both come in? I've set the table with the good china, and I could wrap you a slice for. There's no time, Dad." Charlotte's voice had that edge again, sharp as broken glass. "We're already running late." Derek was already lifting my suitcase, hefting it toward their car without asking permission. The casual violation of my space, my belongings, sent heat rushing to my face. Late for what exactly? I asked, but they were already walking toward the SUV. I took one last look at my house. The porch swing where Clara and I used to watch sunsets. The garden she'd tended until her final summer, the door with its brass knocker, worn smooth by decades of visitors. Would I see it again tonight? Tomorrow? They positioned me in the back seat like a child. Derek's music played too loud, some electronic beat that made conversation impossible. When I tried to adjust the volume, Charlotte shot me a look through the rearview mirror. We passed Washington Park, where I taught Charlotte to feed the ducks when she was 6. Her small hand had clutched mine as we scattered breadcrumbs across the pond's surface. "Remember when you used to beg me to bring you here every Sunday?" I leaned forward, desperate to bridge the growing distance between us. She didn't look up from her phone. The route took us past Mel's Diner, where Clara and I had shared coffee and pie every Sunday after church. Past the library where I'd volunteered reading to children, past the hardware store where I'd worked after retiring from engineering, helping young homeowners with their projects. Each landmark felt like a goodbye I hadn't chosen. "Where exactly are we going?" I finally asked as we turned onto unfamiliar roads heading east. Derek caught my eye in the mirror, his smile sharp and satisfied. "Somewhere you'll be much happier, Bill. Trust us." The word trust sat bitter in my mouth. When had my daughter and her husband started speaking about me rather than to me? When had I become Bill instead of Dad? Charlotte was texting someone, her fingers flying across the screen. I caught fragments, finally doing it, and much better this way. The phone's blue light reflected off her face, making her features look cold and unfamiliar. 20 minutes later, Silverwood Manor came into view, a sprawling modern facility with manicured lawns and a circular driveway. The architecture was all glass and steel, designed to look expensive rather than welcoming. A sign by the entrance read, "Silverwood Manor, where life begins again." My stomach dropped. "Are we visiting someone?" Charlotte turned in her seat, that artificial brightness returning to her voice. "Happy birthday, Dad. This is your new home." The words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. New home? The cherry pie I'd baked sat abandoned in my kitchen. The table I'd set with Clara's china would remain empty. The suitcase I hadn't packed contained clothes for a life I hadn't chosen. Derek parked under the covered entrance, already reaching for the keys. Through the windshield, I could see elderly residents in wheelchairs on the covered patio, staring blankly at the landscaping. "This is temporary, right?" My voice sounded small, desperate, just until. "Let's just see how you settle in," Charlotte said, avoiding my eyes. The car's engine ticked as it cooled. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of lawnmowers maintaining the facility's perfect appearance. Everything was so neat, so orderly, so final. I sat frozen in the back seat while they climbed out, their movements efficient and practiced. This wasn't a surprise. It was an execution, and I was the only one who didn't know it was coming. I sat motionless in the back seat, feeling the coldness of the leather as Charlotte and Derek walked inside. This was not a visit, this was an execution, and I was the only one who didn't know it was coming. Derek yanked my suitcase from the trunk with unnecessary force, the worn leather scraping against the car's edge. "I can help with that," I offered, but he waved me away. "We've got this handled, Bill." His tone was dismissive, as if I were already less than capable. Charlotte checked her watch for the third time in 2 minutes, her foot tapping against the asphalt. She wouldn't meet my eyes, focusing instead on the facility's automatic glass doors. "How long will I be staying here?" I asked as we walked toward the entrance. "Let's just see how you settle in first," she replied, the same evasive answer as before. My house keys still hung on my keychain, solid and familiar in my pocket. If this was temporary, why did it feel so permanent? Why had they packed everything I owned into a single suitcase? "This is for your own good, Dad." Charlotte's voice carried the rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced this speech. "You're not getting any younger, and frankly, we can't provide the level of care you need. But I bought you that house in Beaverton. I funded Derek's coffee shop when no bank would touch it. I've never asked for anything in return, except—" "You forget where you put your keys," Charlotte interrupted, cutting off my words like they were inconvenient noise. "Last month you couldn't remember where you parked at the grocery store. Those are warning signs, Dad." As we approached the entrance, I caught fragments of their whispered conversation. The ambient noise of the fountain in the distance was supposed to mask their words, but my hearing was still sharp. "Now we can finally sell his house," Derek murmured to Charlotte. "Put everything into the coffee shop expansion. The real estate agent thinks we can get at least $800,000, she whispered back. "Maybe more if we stage it right." The words hit me like ice water in my veins. The house Clara and I had scrimped and saved to buy, where we'd painted every room ourselves, where we'd planned to grow old together. They'd already talked to a real estate agent, already planned my life around their profit margins. I stood alone in the lobby, my suitcase at my feet, finally understanding the scope of what had happened. This wasn't about my safety or my health. This was about $800,000 and the inconvenience of an aging father who had outlived his usefulness. The automatic doors whispered shut behind me, sealing me into my new reality. But as I stood there, something cold and calculating began to crystallize in my chest. They had underestimated me in fundamental ways. They knew about the house, but not about the investment portfolio Clara and I had built. They knew about my age, but not about my connections. They knew about my loneliness, but not about my capacity for strategic thinking. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the reception desk. If they wanted to play games with my life, they were about to learn that 70 years of experience had taught me a few things about winning. I walked through Silverwood Manor with purpose now, my stride confident despite the institutional carpet designed to muffle sound. I observed the facility's details with an engineer's eye. Cost-cutting measures everywhere, understaffed nursing stations, residents sitting alone in common areas, some staring blankly at muted television screens showing game shows no one was watching. The administrative wing felt different immediately. Thicker carpet, actual artwork instead of mass-produced prints, furniture that suggested comfort rather than mere function. The secretary looked up from her computer as I approached her desk. "I need to speak with Mr. Thompson immediately." "Is this about your accommodation?" "I can have Jennifer. It's about documentation irregularities." "Tell him William Harrison is here." She spoke softly into her phone, then looked up with surprise. "He'll see you right away, Mr. Harrison." The office door opened before I reached it. Thompson stood behind his desk, coffee cup rattling against its saucer in his suddenly unsteady hand. His face had gone pale beneath his administrative tan. "You're William Harrison, the founder of MedTech Innovations." "I am," I replied, taking the chair across from his desk without being invited. "And I want to see my complete admission file, every document." Thompson's hands trembled as he pulled a manila folder from his desk drawer. I examined each page with the methodical precision that had built my company from nothing. The signature on the power of attorney was clearly forged. Charlotte had practiced, but she'd missed the slight tremor I developed in my left hand after Clara's death. The medical evaluation was completely fabricated. Who submitted these documents? I asked, my voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. Your daughter brought them this morning, he said. This isn't my signature. I pointed to the power of attorney. And I've never met this Dr. Morrison, who supposedly evaluated my mental capacity. Thompson's face went from pale to gray. If there are irregularities in the documentation, tell me about your admission protocols. What verification procedures do you follow? Thompson nervously explained the state regulations, liability concerns, and the facility's reputation. He admitted Silverwood Manor had been struggling financially, and recent inspections had been challenging. The facility needed to maintain its reputation, especially with influential families. And what happens when a facility admits someone based on forged documents? I asked. That would be a serious legal matter, Thompson's voice cracked. Criminal fraud, false imprisonment. We could lose our license. I let that hang in the air while I watched his increasingly panicked expression. I think we have a significant problem here, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Harrison, please understand, he said. We had no way of knowing. I'm sure you didn't, I said, standing up and leaving the forged documents scattered across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. I'll need some time to consider my options. Of course, whatever you need, he said. We'll do everything possible to make this right. I walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, I said. How long has Silverwood Manor been struggling financially? His silence told me everything I needed to know. When I returned to my room, each step carried a weight, a purpose, the measured pace of someone who understood exactly where the levers of power were hidden. I observed the facility with new eyes, not as a victim who was dumped here, but as someone who might soon be making decisions about its future. Through the window, I could see the Pacific Ocean stretching into the evening darkness. It makes our problems seem smaller, Clara used to say, her hand warm in mine as we stood on the deck of our house. Our house, the one Charlotte planned to sell for $800,000. Meredith had no idea, none whatsoever. She thought I was just some old engineer living on Social Security and the equity in his house. She'd never shown interest in the foundation, never asked about my business relationships, never bothered to understand the infrastructure Clara and I had built together. In her mind, I was already dead, just an inconvenient body that hadn't stopped breathing yet. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts. Marcus Henley, the Foundation's general counsel. Sarah Chen, our investment manager. Dr. Rebecca Santos, who oversaw our healthcare initiatives. People who understood that the Foundation wasn't just money. It was power, applied with precision and purpose. I touched Marcus Henley's number on my phone screen. It was time to remind the world that William Harrison wasn't dead yet. The morning after my phone call to Marcus, I sat in Silverwood Manor's dining room, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and amber. Marcus had worked through the night with our legal team. By 8 a.m., 3 attorneys were already in Portland, armed with documentation that would unravel Charlotte's carefully constructed fraud, piece by piece. Mr. Harrison. Jennifer approached my table, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced with nervous respect. Mr. Thompson would like to see you in his office. I found him pacing behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning coolness. When he saw me, he ended his call abruptly. That was our insurance company, he said. They're very concerned about our liability exposure. If someone was admitted based on forged documents, that someone has a name, I interrupted quietly, and that someone built the medical device company that revolutionized cardiac monitoring in the 1982nd. I suggest you remember that. Thompson's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Of course, Mr. Harrison. What I mean is, we want to cooperate fully with any investigation. Good, I said, because Detective Morrison from the Portland Police Fraud Division will be here at 10 a.m. She'll need access to all admission records, staff interviews, and security footage from the 20th of April. He was almost speechless. You've already contacted the police? I've contacted everyone who needs to know, I replied. The district attorney's office is opening a formal investigation into elder abuse and document fraud. The state licensing board wants to review Silverwood Manor's admission procedures, and my foundation's board of directors is very interested in how their investment has been managed. I left him with that thought and walked back to my room. Through the window, I could see a police car pulling into the visitor parking area. Detective Morrison right on schedule. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Search warrant executed on C's house at 7 a.m. Found Clara's jewelry, your engineering notebooks, family photos, everything documented as evidence. Another message followed immediately. Derek's business bank records show payment to a document forger. Paper trail complete. I put the phone down and opened the window to breathe the salt air. Somewhere across town, Charlotte was probably discovering one crucial detail she'd overlooked. She'd never bothered to learn who her father really was. The television at Silverwood Manor's common room broadcast the evening news. Residents gathered, their dinner trays forgotten, as the anchor delivered the story that would define my daughter's legacy. Portland police have arrested a local businesswoman and her husband on charges of elder abuse and fraud. Meredith Walsh and Trevor Walsh allegedly forged documents to have her 70-year-old father committed to a care facility against his will. A photograph of Charlotte filled the screen, a professional headshot from her coffee shop's website, all smiles and artificial warmth. The irony wasn't lost on me. The victim, Howard Lester, is the founder of MedTech Innovations and a prominent Portland philanthropist. I watched as the narrative I had orchestrated began to unfold, a symphony of consequences for their actions. A phone call came through, Charlotte's name flashing on the screen. "Dad, please, you have to call off the police." "This is all a misunderstanding," she pleaded, her voice tight with panic. "A misunderstanding? You forged legal documents. You stole Clara's jewelry. You had me declared mentally incompetent," I replied, my voice steady. "We were trying to help you," she insisted. "The house is too big. You're all alone." "Stop," I said, my voice carrying decades of authority. "Just stop lying. I know about the $1,500 to Derek Coulter. I know about the practice signatures. I know about your plan to sell my house." The silence that followed was a chasm between us. "Dad, if this goes to trial, it'll destroy our business. Ryan's college fund. You should have thought about Ryan before you decided to erase your father." I ended the call. A little while later, another call came, this time from my grandson, Ryan. His voice was young, confused, and ashamed. "Grandpa, I just saw the news." I had no idea what Mom and Dad were planning. Hearing his voice, I was reminded that innocent people get caught in the crossfire of other people's greed. "I know you didn't, son," I said, my heart aching for him. "Is it true? Did they really steal Grandma Clara's things?" he asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "Then I'm so sorry, Grandpa. If I'd known. This isn't your fault, Ryan. Your parents made their choices. What happens now?" Through the window I watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold. Now your parents face the consequences of their actions, and you decide what kind of man you want to become. The next morning, a news van was parked outside Silverwood Manor. Derek's coffee shop had a line of protesters holding signs reading, "Elder abuse is not business," and "Jail the thieves." Their Yelp reviews had plummeted overnight. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Charlotte. I deleted them without listening. 2 days later, I walked into Silverwood Manor's conference room to find 5 board members standing respectfully around a polished mahogany table. Instead of being a confused patient, I entered as someone whose presence commanded attention. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Thompson began, his voice devoid of its previous condescension. "We'd be deeply honored if you would consider joining our Patient Care Oversight Board." "I accept," I said, settling into the chair they'd pulled out for me, "provided we prioritize resident dignity above profit margins." "I've accepted your offer to join the Patient Care Board," I told Mr. Thompson and the board members, "and I've already prepared a preliminary plan." I opened the portfolio Marcus had prepared. "The Lester Foundation will cover all expenses," I explained to them. "The foundation will cover all expenses, at least for the first year. Dignity doesn't have a price tag." The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications of my offer. This wasn't just a promise of money. It was a commitment to a new philosophy. I had found my purpose, a way to honor Clara's memory and use our legacy to help others. I slid photographs across the table. The empty activity room, outdated common areas, understaffed nursing stations. These aren't just budget items, they're people's lives. We toured the facility together, and I watched their expressions change as they saw Silverwood Manor through resident eyes rather than administrative convenience. Edna showed us her small collection of books, apologizing for their worn condition. This space could accommodate 20 chess tables, I told the board, gesturing toward the underutilized recreation room. And this wall would be perfect for displaying resident artwork. Board member Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. The resident engagement would improve dramatically. Engagement, physical health, mental stimulation, family satisfaction, everything's interconnected. I agreed. Quality care isn't expensive when you measure the right outcomes. Back in the conference room, I signed the board appointment documents while they watched with something approaching awe. One more thing, I said, capping my pen with deliberate ceremony. I want monthly progress reviews with resident input, not surveys about satisfaction, but actual conversations about what they need to maintain dignity. Mr. Thompson practically vibrated with nervous energy. Of course, Mr. Harrison, whatever you think best. Walking back to my room, I felt Clara's presence in the improved lighting of the hallways, in the plans taking shape, and in the hope beginning to replace resignation on residents' faces. She'd always believed that money without purpose was just paper. Purpose without resources was just wishful thinking. I had both now. My phone rang as I reached room 237. Marcus with news about the media strategy for Charlotte's case. It was time to ensure the legal victory translated into lasting change. By May, the story had grown beyond local news into a cautionary tale about elder abuse that resonated across the country. I watched the coverage from Silverwood Manor's common room, surrounded by residents who'd become unlikely celebrities in their own right. Local couple charged with defrauding elderly father appear in court today. The anchor announced over footage of Charlotte and Derek hurrying past reporters. Charlotte and Derek Finch face multiple felony charges in what prosecutors call a systematic scheme to steal from William Harrison, founder of MedTech Innovations. Lyle shook his head in disgust. How does someone do that to their own parent? That evening, Ryan helped me navigate the social media storm engulfing his parents. Charlotte's Instagram account, once full of carefully curated family photos, had become a wasteland of angry comments. "Look at this," Ryan said, scrolling through the responses to her last post. A picture of her and Derek smiling at their coffee shop. "Disgusting,"